It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So I know you've made this claim here that you think that all these workers are being put in danger by this oil boom.
Well, that's a generalized statement, but I will say that there needs to be a balance, which is not present right now. We certainly are benefiting from the oil boom generally across the entire state, whether it's from the Eagle Ford Shale in the South Texas area, whether it's from the Odessa Midland area, and even here locally in the Barnett Shale area. And that's all well and good, but there needs to be a balance between the economic progress and benefit and the safety of the people in the industry, not only in the industry, but also the safety of people even on the roadways, because we're talking about an industry that not only has workers there on the rigs at the sites, but there are parts of this industry hauling waste products, water products, and things of that nature to and from sites and to and from waste stations on the public roads, and a lot of those drivers are not trained or equipped, and therefore the general public is also at risk to a certain extent.
See, now this sounds to me like the kind of story local TV news would pick up and run with, and they'd scare everybody that's living out in Midland, Odessa, that their kids are going to be run over by 18-wheelers. I just don't see that happening. I mean, I know there have been some injuries out there, and that's going to happen when you have a rush and you simply have more people working on more rigs. Your number of injuries are going to go up. But I think the economic benefits and gains far outweigh the risk to folks, if there even is a real measurable risk.
Well, Grant, that's a good observation, but here is one thing that's being overlooked in that, and that is that offshore drilling has a lot of safety regulations, and therefore there's so much fewer fatalities and serious injuries, including amputations, broken bones, permanent brain injury, things of that nature. Even though we had one large explosion, and that's the British Petroleum, the BP explosion that ended up with 11 deaths, that was one incident, that's true. But overall, because of the safety regulations, you see a much lower number of serious injuries and deaths.
Yeah, but you have a lower number of people working out there, too.
Well, that's a good observation, but you can't deny that regulations, and I'm not trying to be a proponent of being overly regulated, far from it.
Right.
I'm trying to talk about a balance here, which is lacking in the onshore oil and gas industry. 2012 was a peak year. We had 65 oil and gas workers in Texas alone who got killed. That does not involve or count 79 other workers who had amputations. There were 82 crush injuries. 92 people suffered burns of varying degrees, and then 675 others had broken bones. For one industry, that's a lot.
Well, it is a lot, but it also, roughnecking is a dangerous business, and you could argue that these guys know what they're getting into when they go into a business like that.
Yes. But is that a justification or an excuse for not having training and also at least a minimum degree of safety regulation? Not talking about over-regulation. Nobody wants that. Nobody's interested in it. We're not talking about hampering business. We're talking about instead looking at it from the perspective of safety. And there's a minimum amount of safety regulation that's lacking for onshore drilling.
Now, do you think
Texas
this is
leads the
mostly
nation.
smaller drilling companies? Because I know you look at Exxon, Chevron, those companies are going to have huge safety regulations that they self-impose.
Generally speaking, that's a true statement. And a lot of times it is the wildcatters, the smaller companies that are going out there and putting up a limited number of rigs, and they're doing it basically with minimum capital investment, minimal training, and they're just trying to see what they can get out of the ground. And that's all well and good from an entrepreneurial spirit and free enterprise, free market, but at the same time, at what cost? And you can argue, well, people know what they're getting into, but people also want to work. They need a job. They need to support their families. Is that a justification for putting them at risk needlessly? Why isn't there at least a minimum amount of safety regulation? That's what we're talking about.
Well, you could argue, too, that they're getting paid a lot more than they normally would because the job is so risky and because there's such a short supply of workers. course. But so let me ask you. So we're talking with Stephen Laird, a Fort Worth attorney. What is the answer here? I mean, I don't want OSHA coming into Texas and just wreaking havoc on these oil firms. What's going to happen if OSHA starts doing that? The price of gas is going to go up.
You know, to a certain extent, there's logic in that, but you keep in mind that there are only 95 OSHA inspectors for the entire state, and very few of them have any expertise or experience in the oil and gas industry. So it's a situation where it's hardly expected that OSHA would come in and overrun the oil and gas industry in Texas. Far from it. We're out of balance.
Well,
that's the bottom line.
You summed it up when you first came on, and you said we need a balance, and I think that actually is something everybody could agree with. And so, Stephen Laird, I appreciate you coming on and talking about this with me. Always good to have you on. Stephen Laird, attorney at law. Great to have you.
Thank you, Grant, very much.